The biggest winter storms so far this season will be moving in, and then we have Arctic air first building up here in Western Canada, will eventually filter in into the US 10 days from now, bringing the coldest temperatures so far this winter. So I appreciate all my subscribers out there. This channel is up to 222,000 subscribers. I appreciate each and every one of you. I put out daily content, about 27 videos a month. And so if you'd like to follow along with throughout the whole entire 2024 season, just hit the subscribe button and follow all my daily breakdowns. So let's really delve into this because this pattern is ripe, folks. We have a lot to talk about. It's about to get very active. So we have a bona fide system building out here into the southwest that will be moving across and create our first snowstorm up here into the northeast. And then we have another system, even stronger system, that's just now building up there into the Aleutian Islands. That is also going to be even more significant, bringing actually severe storms further south, and then very heavy snow up here towards the Ohio Valley, and even some blizzard-like conditions. So there's a lot to talk about. And then we have Arctic air coming in on the backside. So it's going to be a very active setup over the next 10 days. So let's break it down for you. This is where we stand right now for your Thursday into your Friday time frame. We've got winter storm watches for the Sierras. They're about to get crushed with a lot of snow coming your way. Then further inland out here towards Santa Fe into Albuquerque here, we've got winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings in place. And that snow will be activated again across the Texas Panhandle, into western Oklahoma Panhandle, back into Wichita, where they are expecting several inches of snow over the course of the coming days. So this is your Thursday into Friday time frame. It starts around 6 o'clock Thursday morning through about Friday noontime. We're going to be leaving with a pretty good swath of snow across Santa Fe back into New Mexico. That'll swing over into the Texas Panhandle. They could also pick up several inches of snow into western Oklahoma here, back into Kansas. These areas would likely pick up several inches of snow, and even a dust unit or two is not out of the question out as far south as into the Tulsa, Oklahoma region. So as this moves along, it's going to be tapping into a lot of water content values down there in the Gulf of Mexico. There's going to be plenty of precipitation to work with this system. It's going to be ringing out the atmosphere, likely some half-inch amounts as you swing through north and central Texas. But once you swing southbound, those amounts go up to an inch, if not almost 2 inches, right along into Louisiana, into Mississippi, back into Alabama, and eventually head into the Florida Panhandle. That swings across into Georgia as well as into the Carolinas. Now, this is the system that will continue to traverse across. So you're talking about your winter storm impacts for the next 3 days right now. So you got minor to major impacts across these regions, across New Mexico into the Panhandle here. But once we get into the Carolinas, we've got to be concerned about some ice starting to build as it taps into some of that colder air. And as of right now, we're looking at least of a trace up to 1/10 of an inch of ice coating the roadways. And that's all starts around Saturday morning time frame into the afternoon. So it's going to be a treacherous travel. Even a glaze of ice is very difficult to drive on. Even sometimes it's worse because you're not expecting it, folks. So be on high alert. This is Saturday morning across these regions highlighted in this pink area. You could be looking at anywhere from a glaze to 1/10 of an inch of ice just coating all the surfaces as this low pressure continues to deepen. And then now we get into that January 6th and 7th time frame. Now we've got a bona fide snowstorm heading up into the northeast. So as of right now, we got a coastal low developing. That area of low pressure develops near the Gulf Coast by late Friday and then tracks northeastward towards the Delmarva region. And then that low expands off the coastline here. And we've got a 70 to 90% of at least 4 inches or more probability of snow across Pennsylvania, northern portions of New Jersey, back into New York here, into Massachusetts and Connecticut, into Vermont and New Hampshire. We're looking at some very heavy snow, some ice to the, ice further south into the Carolinas and back into portions of Virginia. But this all gets going on Saturday. That bleeds over into Sunday. So right now, the NAM is just now coming into range. We kind of get a better feel of the actual storm track of this system as this low pressure's setting up shop across the coast here. That's going to pull all that snow inland. So we could be looking at some good healthy snows into the interior regions of at least 6 to 10 inches is definitely not out of the question. Now those areas back into New York City, you're obviously on the borderline from this system, but I still think you'll break that drought. You're likely get an inch or two from this system, but Boston, I think, gets crushed with this particular system. With at least 4 to 6 inches, if not more. And there's actually more snow going to be on the table as well. Here's the latest ensembles from the European guidance. So right now I'm showing you the NAM that's just now in range, and then kind of a blend of the models as well as the overall ensembles of the European guidance still has that snow track. And then of course it drifts it a little bit further south. I mean, so yeah, you could have a sharp gradient here. This is obviously could have wobbles in this area. So right now, that's what I said. Hey, New York City is likely going to be on the borderline with this particular setup. But further inland, like into Scranton, those areas into State College, back into Pennsylvania here, those areas will definitely be likely to get some 6 to 10 inch amounts across this region. Of course, some isolated totals even higher than that. But then we've got a bigger system that's going to be building. This is Monday time frame. That storm that's in the Aleutian Islands now rapidly deepens, has digs down into a bowling ball type trop injection down here to the south. And it's going to be a very dynamic day for the deep south. You're going to have actually really high temperatures further south. It points almost 90 degrees for a high temperature down there in deep south Texas. Notice the temperatures down there back into the low 70s, out ahead of this very dynamic system. So you got freezing again into the panhandle, and then you got near 90 degrees further south. So this whole corridor is going to be susceptible, because you're in the warm sector, for severe storms with this particular setup. So this is your Monday time frame. So we're looking at all 3 modes of severe storms with a lot of shear within this atmosphere back into the Houston Metroplex. That it does include Beaumont, into the Lake Charles region, back into New Orleans, getting into Mobile, and that does include, will likely swing all the way back into Tallahassee, and that will just continue as that low pressure moves across. This is the warmer side to the system. You've got severe storms. This will be in the day on Tuesday time frame, back into Savannah, into the Tallahassee region, into Gainesville, likely into Tampa, back into Orlando here, and then points southward. Definitely be on the high alert for severe storms into the heat of the afternoon further south. But then there's the cold side to the storm, right? So you got a very dynamic system. You got that cold air bleeding in from the northwest, diving southeast. There's your freezing line as you get into the afternoon hours on Monday. All that transfers over to snow again across the Texas Panhandle, western Oklahoma, into Kansas. That heads into Iowa, and then further south is just kind of a chillier rain back into Oklahoma City, into the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, into East Texas, and then you get those severe storms further south along the I-20, I-10 corridor. But as we get into the backside, likely on Tuesday morning, on the backside of this system, this will likely transfer to all snow on the backside into the Oklahoma City region, probably a couple inches from this system as this continues to rapidly deepen. Then we have an even bigger storm to deal with, a 991 millibar, as the snow really starts to crank out into Missouri, into Illinois, back into Indiana and Ohio. And as this continues to ramp up, we're looking at some very intense snow. We could be looking at 1 to 2 inch per hour snowfall rates as this low continues to rapidly deepen across Illinois, into Indiana, back into Michigan this time. And then, yes, that would be more snow across Pennsylvania. But look what happens further south. It's just, you're going to be crushed with very heavy rain across the Carolinas, across the Florida region, into the Southeast. Be prepared to have a lot of wet days on the table, because this El Nino is on full throttle, folks. It is active. Okay, so once we get into that Wednesday time frame, look what the European model does for it. I mean, rapidly deepens down to a 964 millibar. Look at those tight isobars. I mean, these winds are going to be cranking. We could be looking at blizzard-like conditions with snow flying on the backside and then heavy rain. It's just going to be a nasty day up here into the Ohio Valley, back into the Mid-Atlantic, and back into the Northeast again. But look at some of the breakdown on some of the winds that are going to be coming out of this system. I mean, you only really need 35-mile-per-hour winds for 3 hours at a time for blizzard-like conditions, and you pretty much got that across the board into the Southeast, into the Ohio Valley region. But once you get back up into the Northeast, yeah, you've got higher winds with the first system that's coming in this weekend. But once this one hits on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, these could be even bigger winds associated with these up here into Pennsylvania. Some 50, 60, some 70-mile-per-hour wind gust is definitely not out of the question. We're probably talking about widespread power outages by then with all the heavy snow. You got the ice too, and then all the flooding rains. It's just going to be a nasty day as we go into that Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. So the Climate Prediction Center is pretty much on track with this, with that second storm laying down a good healthy snows across this region. They actually up the ante for moderate snows once we get into that 9th, 10th, and 11th time frame up here towards northern Illinois and Missouri, back into Michigan. And then there's that second swath once it hits the Mid-Atlantic again, compounding on the top of the first event back into Pennsylvania again and upstate New York. But once the breakdown you get on the blend, this is the blend of models. This is looking at more like the conservative view. This is like the Canadian, this is the GFS, this is the European, this is all the models, folks. This is the kind of the National Weather Service blend. The more conservative kind of gives you an idea of some of the snows are going to be laying down over the course of the next 7 days. And if you zoom in, even to say the Boston area, even on the blend, it's hitting about 9 inches of snow. So obviously that would be, you know, we haven't really had much snow so far this winter, especially up here in the Northeast. And so this will be laying down a good healthy snowpack once all this is said and done, once we hit that 11th time frame of January. But look at what the precipitation does. This is the amount of water. This is between the water and the snow for the next 7 days. This area right here, okay, it encompasses 61 trillion gallons of water. That is crazy to think about for the month of January, right? I mean, that's a lot of water content. So we're looking at some, you know, flooding rains coming up the Southeast coast into the Carolinas, and then the heavier snows. If you combine all that, that's just a lot of heavy rain and a lot of precipitation, even for like May standards, much less into January. So this is a very dynamic system, these two systems combined, as this will be moving across. But then now let's take you back up into the Arctic, folks. There's a lot happening. Remember my January outlook. We talked about this sudden stratospheric warming event, this spike in the Arctic. We got confirmation this morning. We've got a 60 degree surge in those temperatures up there in the stratosphere. This is about 20 miles up in the stratosphere. Go back and look at my January forecast put out about 10 days ago. We talked about this exact scenario likely come to fruition for the month of January. And this is exactly what we have for displacement of the polar vortex. You got that spike up in the Arctic, you know. The last chart was up to about 60 degrees Celsius, a difference of 60 degrees above average up there into the stratosphere. This is about 20 miles up. So it takes a little bit to filter that colder air that's displaced, this polar lobe that's displaced from the Arctic, and filter down through the mid latitudes and all the way down to the surface. So we look at this look at some of the latest global guidances going out to that 11th time frame. This is after we put down a healthy snowpack, right? So by the time we hit that January 12th time frame, we've got intense Arctic air building up there into British Columbia, up there in Western Canada, where we're going to have pulses of that colder air start to trickle down and drain down from the stratosphere. And by the time we get to that 13th of the month of January, this is going to be your coldest temperatures so far we've seen this winter. We're looking at temperature anomalies over 30 degrees below normal in the coldest month of the year. So that's definitely going to be some colder air coming in after these two snowstorms leave a pretty good snowpack, and that will likely help this colder air travel further south than what it could be without that snowpack. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. I know it was a lot to cover, right? It's a mouthful, but this pattern is ripe, folks. You got to stay with me because I'll keep you well ahead of the storm. So catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.